This class deals with the selection process. It's one video amongst 10 on this topic, and it's advisable that you view all of the various videos and make your own notes and get a consistent set of notes on this important topic. But in this particular video we're going to deal with the interview. Now, this is the most common form of selection. It's, I suppose, easily done. It's easy to set up. The candidate is invited to the company, let's say, and is interviewed, is questioned about his or her past experience, work experience, and perhaps also their education, and a general idea about the person is taken on board. So it's not a very sophisticated approach, but it is the most common form. If the work was highly specialised and highly paid, the candidate may be asked to attend an assessment centre. But for most routine type work, interviews are how the process is conducted. Interviews are the most common form of selection procedure. They provide an opportunity for the candidate and the interviewer to meet face to face, and that obviously facilitates communications. They're able to speak to each other face to face and get a feeling for what they're like and what they require. They can see facial gestures and they understand more about the organisation because they deal face to face. So they're able to ask questions, they're able to see the environment, perhaps to visit the company, they know what they have written in their application. So from the candidate's point of view, it's a good experience. But from the employer's point of view, they're also able to meet the candidate and get a feeling for what he or she is like. Candidate and interviewer get the chance to exchange information about the job position and assess whether the job is suitable for the candidate. It's important that the candidate gets the right job, not just any job, but the job that will motivate them, that will give them some sort of satisfaction, that they will not just get a salary at the end of the month, but they will get some sort of enjoyment out of work, and they will like their colleagues and will like the environment, and it's the type of work that they want to do. And the candidate and the interviewer can discuss the job, discuss the environment, discuss the company, discuss the conditions of the employment, and throughout the whole process the interview is taking place because they are getting to know each other and getting to know what they like and dislike, and more information is being passed across. It's a face-to-face, it's a personal connection. Interviews benefit both parties. For example, the candidate, well, they get a better understanding of the job requirements and the organisation, so they benefit from the interview because they're able to ask questions and they are being briefed about the job and the company and conditions of employment and so on. They have an opportunity, as I said, to ask questions and clear any doubts about the job. That's important. And they may be able to meet members of the organisation. Should they be offered the job, they could perhaps meet colleagues, future colleagues, ones that they're going to work with, and so they have time when they leave the premises to reflect on the whole experience, and is this the type of work they want to do, and do they want to be involved in that sort of team or in that sort of activity. But they're able to meet members of the organisation, and that's important. So they're able to assess the job and the organisation and to see if it is all suitable to their requirements. I said it benefits both parties. Now the organisation, well, they get a chance to discuss the job requirements in detail, so there's no doubt in the mind of the applicant what the job entails. So the if the applicant decides to take the job, they know what's expected of them. And it's important that they are openly briefed about the requirements of the job so that they don't arrive in and get surprised by the requirements and get upset or are confused about the nature of the job. They should be briefed, and the organisation has a chance to do that in detail. There's also a chance to portray the company in a positive light, to send out a good signal about the company. The company is a caring company. It's a learning environment. They value learning, and they value contact with the employees, and they value the contribution of the employees, and there may be quality circles or some sort of focus groups within the organisation, and information flows back to management, and management is caring. It's a good, safe environment. In other words, the business is able to project itself, and that's an opportunity for them to deal with somebody who at the time of the interview is on the outside. They're dealing with somebody on the outside and are able to project a positive image of the business. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing for the employer because they have an opportunity to do so. The organisation can also observe the candidate and assess the potential to perform the job or not. So they may be questioned, they may be shown the particular job they will be working at, and then have some questions about the job, and the organisation gets a chance to observe the candidate and what the candidate feels about the work, and whether they can do it, and whether they're enthusiastic enough to want it, and what their requirements are, and so on. So it's an opportunity for both sides to clear the air. Both sides get to know each other and get to know what's required, and there is no ambiguity left. There is no any questions that need to be posed are posed at this point, and clarity is sought. So there is clear understanding following the interview. So traditional interviews, well, these are also referred to as unstructured interviews. So this is probably the most common type, unstructured. They're mainly unplanned, uncontrolled, bilateral communications. The interview questions, the questions develop at the time of the interview. The whole direction of the interview is determined by the flow of conversation between the two parties. So they're unstructured. The candidate may say that they went to such a school, and the interviewer may say, did you like the school? And there will then follow a conversation about the school or whatever. It's unstructured. But they are still sizing each other up. They are still getting an understanding of the type of people they are and the type of organisation it is. But it's just not structured. There's no set format, no set questions to be answered. It's very open. They're very flexible, and they enable good communications between the candidate and the interviewer. So it's easy. It's a very free style, very flexible. But of course, it's then for the interviewer to make sense of it all and to make recommendations as to whether this person should be employed or not. So even though it's unstructured and it seems quite straightforward and easy, then the interviewer must make a decision following the interview. Anderson and Shackleton, they state the reasons for unstructured interviews by limitations. For example, there could be a self-fulfilling prophecy, and this effect means that sometimes the person being interviewed was interviewed because of something they wrote on their application form. So in the selection process, they were invited in, and in the interview, I should say, which is open-ended and loose and unstructured, the point was brought up, and therefore the person interviewing was influenced by that positive point, and they believed that the person was the right person for the job. It wasn't a very critical process. It wasn't trying to dig out more information. The information was what was supplied, and they discussed that particular part of the application form, and that's all that was discussed, and the decision was made based on that. So it's not a very comprehensive view of the whole process of interviewing. Perhaps the interview focused just on one or 2 points, and other issues were not even discussed. So it might be felt very constrained in terms of its coverage. There is a danger in unstructured interviews that there is some stereotyping. In other words, the interviewer may look at the applicant in terms of the way the applicant presents him or herself, the way they dress, act, the way they express themselves, and they may assign the person to some group who have similar characteristics. That group might be a local group that they like or they don't like. They might assign the person just by appearance even to have certain characteristics. They might believe the person has got certain characteristics because they dress in a certain way, or they like a particular style of music, or they come from a different area or whatever. So there might be stereotyping, which is wrong. It can lead to, well, it's prejudicial really. It's looking at prejudices more than looking at the person and the suitability of the person for employment. So there might be stereotyping, and whether the person interviewing takes steps to correct it or not, it still may be there, and it still may be an issue. So it's far better in this case to have a structured interview, perhaps, or have an interview conducted by several people, so that there is a balancing out of any issues like stereotyping. There's also something called the halo and horns effect. It could be that the person has got one positive characteristic, one big positive characteristic, and perhaps a lot of characteristics which are neutral. They're not good and they're not bad. But because of the one big characteristic, the one big positive characteristic, the interviewer sees all the rest as positives as well, when in fact they're not. They're neither good nor bad. They're just average achievements. But there's one big achievement, and that seems to overwhelm all the rest. And that's called the halo effect. There's one very good point, very strong point in the candidate, and then all of the other points are almost ignored. This one strong point carries the day. This one strong point leads to the appointment. And of course that's wrong. Perhaps all of the points should have the equal weighting, and the interviewer should be careful to make sure that all the characteristics are assessed and assessed appropriately. The horns effect, by the way, is just the opposite of the halo. The halo is the one good effect, the big positive effect, pulling all the rest up. The horns effect is the person's got something wrong, something bad about the application, something weak about the application. But all the rest there could be positive. But that weak one plays on the mind of the interviewer and brings down the candidate. But it's only one weak characteristic. All the rest of them are very positive, let's say. But in the mind of the interviewer, that one weakness gets bigger and bigger and plays on the interviewer's mind and eventually will reject the candidate. So there is a danger with unstructured interviews, that this halo and horns effect, as it's called. The contrast effect, well, this also is quite negative because it means that the candidate may be contrasted with other people, and sometimes very unfairly contrasted. For example, if the candidate is being interviewed for a particular task, and that task is currently being undertaken by a very popular and very skillful worker, then the candidate looks ill-equipped, looks very poor in comparison. So there's this wrong comparison. There's the comparison of the newcomer, the candidate, versus this very popular, skilled individual who's doing the job at the moment, but who's going to leave the job when the new appointee comes in. But that contrast effect is quite it's wide scale. There's a wide scale use of it, but it's also the case that that it distorts the selection process. The person who is disadvantaged by the contrast effect, had they been given the job and given the test, they could also be popular and efficient. In fact, it could have been even more efficient. It's just that they weren't given the chance, perhaps. There's also the similar to me effect. Sometimes the interviewer will ask questions and get responses, and they'll think that's very similar to me. But the interviewer, is not the person who will be doing that particular task. But the person interviewing will build up almost a relationship. They will understand the person because they think this person is very similar to me. However, the requirements of the candidate is to perform a particular task within the business, not to interview people. So being similar to me is not necessarily a good thing. Being capable of doing the task that is required and set out in the job specification, that's what's required. So the interviewer, if the interviewer is relating to the responses and think this person's very similar to me, and makes an appointment because they think this person is similar to them, that could be a very weak appointment. What they really need to do is to make sure that that person can do the job and deal with the job specification as set out. There's also a personal liking effect, where there's a linkage between the two of them. They see eye to eye. They come from the same school. They didn't realize this until the interview, but they come from the same school, or they come from the same area, or they have something in common. They like, according to the application form, the candidate likes a particular type of music, or the candidate likes a particular football club. There's a personal liking effect that then develops. And again, a weak appointment may take place because of this personal liking effect. The person appointed is not appointed to support a football club. The person appointed is to do a particular job that's set out in the job specification. So the personal liking effect is a weakness as well. So there are many things that can go wrong with the unstructured interview, even though it is the most popular form of interview. It's convenient, it's cheap to set up, it's easy to do, but there are many pitfalls, and this 6 illustrate some of the important pitfalls, the important problems that this technique encounters. Now, structured interviews. Well, structured interview approach has helped improve the way interviews are constructed. We've seen the problems of the unstructured ones, and the structured ones is meant to overcome those problems. It helps interviewers in predicting performance within the job role. So it helps the interviewers to try and predict performance. It guides the interviewer in the type of questions, relates the questions to the job specification. It controls the interview. It gets a backdrop on the person, their communication skills, their team working skills, all of the skills that the business will require on top of education attainment. But it's controlled. The questions are controlled. The process of structured interviews include asking all candidates the same questions and marking their responses against a rating system. Well, that gets rid of most of the effects of the unstructured one, the liking one, when the interviews can go off on a tangent and discuss the local football club, which is not relevant. But if all the candidates are asked the same questions and the responses are rated, then there is a fairness in the procedure. And within all of the applicants, the one who responds best will come to the top. Questions asked are relevant to the job and the candidate's ability. With the unstructured ones, all sorts of prejudices could creep in, and this person is like me, so therefore this person is good. That may creep in. Or the halo effect, as I said. People overlook weaknesses because there is something good that they like. There's one thing that's good that they like, and so they overlook all the others. But questions which are written out in advance and are relevant to the job and the candidate's ability, that controls the interviewer. And the interviewer must get responses to those questions. The downside is that the interviewer is constrained. The interviewer doesn't have much time to probe the candidate, to ask any questions around the questions that have to be posed. So there's very little opportunity for the candidate to explain their answers. Their answers are taken and to move on to the next question. But the candidate might want to explain why he left the previous employment and why he didn't go to study engineering as opposed to studying something else. So he might want to, or she might want to, give elaboration, but the structured interview doesn't give an opportunity to do that. So these are some of the issues that we encounter in interview situations. It's important to go across these and pad out your information on interviews so that you've got a good set of notes on this area. It is an important area, not just within the module, but it's something that the chances are you're going to encounter anyway. So it's worth knowing. Well, that's all I'm going to deal with here, so I'm going to leave it at that. Say thank you for watching.